Of the few books available about Zen Buddhism in the 60s, the most popular, those by D.T. Suzuki, Philip Kapleau, and Alan Watts, all stressed becoming enlightened. Suzuki Roshi, however, said that while it would be a good experience to have, it probably wouldn't matter if one didn't. He illustrated this with a story on two encounters between Bodhidharma, who, although an Indian monk, became the first ancestor of Chinese Zen Buddhism, and his Chinese student, Eka, who was to become the second. Bodhidharma told Eka, "If you want to enter our practice, cast yourself off from outward objects and stop your emotional and thinking activities within." This is good advice for all of us. So if you want to enter our practice, cast yourself off from outward objects and stop your emotional and thinking activities within. He continues, "When you become like a brick or stone wall, you will enter the way." When meditating, we essentially cast ourselves off from external objects. And by taking the precepts and following them, we start to notice emotional and thinking activities within and begin to act accordingly. Over time, we become less and less disturbed by things either external or internal, and finally become as impervious to them as a brick or stone wall, and thus able to enter the way. Turning the lamp within and taking the backward step also express this. Even what Bodhisattva has said so far to Eka may not be totally irrelevant to the mindfulness movement. For one thing, there is no precepts. But because the mindfulness movement uses meditation to reduce the stress in people's lives, as you know. Okay. Much of that is due to internal and external pressures that we all are apt to have personalized lists of. However, Shakyamuni Buddha hadn't dealt with stress per se, but said that the main cause of our suffering, if simply put by me, was thinking about ourselves too much, despite there not being any self in the first place. While, quote again, becoming like a brick or stone wall, particularly, unquote, particularly, might not be a relevant goal for those in using the mindfulness movement method, it does reflect experience during meditation. I have mentioned recently that when sitting, we can clearly observe that thoughts seem to come out of nowhere. This is equally true for those thoughts in our daily lives. But we tend not to pay attention to where they come from, focused as we are on our immediate affairs. We take for granted that our thoughts must be ours, though careful observation would show that they don't always have, careful observation would show that they don't always have that much to do with us, even those seemingly clothed in the fabric of our memories. All that we actually notice is that thoughts are there. Many years later, back to the koan, Eka reported, perhaps, it's not clear from the koan, Eka reported to Bodhidharma, "There is no gap in my practice. There is no gap in my practice." By this, he meant that he was in a constant state of mindfulness, one in which, as Suzuki Roshi put it, there is never any cessation of practice. But Bodhidharma came back with, then who are you? Who does constant practice? In asking who it is who has this total awareness, Bodhidharma was checking whether a self wasn't involved somehow, as the use of my in there is no gap in my practice would suggest. My is a self. However, depending on the accuracy of the translation, of course. Chinese may or may not have my. They often don't. Okay? Or Chinese or Japanese doesn't. When there are such gaps in our practice, it is likely that they are concerned with thoughts of self. However, thoughts in which we are doing something to get something out of it, for example, those connected with desires, or thoughts in which we are doing something to avoid getting something out of it, those ones connected to anger or fear, are very different from those about doing something merely because it is there to be done. In the latter, no self-interest is involved then, and attention can be put solely into doing just what we are doing. Another type of thoughts occur when we feel a lack of interest in what we are doing, and so we don't pay full attention to doing it. One's connected to those aptly named delusions, those delusions aptly named daydreams. Wanting, not wanting, and not caring are the three main hindrances alluded to in the Heart Sutra. Even if Eka's thoughts were no longer concerned with such selfish intent, he still could act as if he had a self. That he doesn't think that he does have a self, that's a little complicated there. If he doesn't think that he does have a self, is shown by his reply to Bodhidharma. He said, because I know myself well, it is difficult to say who I am. Because I know myself well, it is difficult to say who I am. We indeed can be many persons during a day. I am more than acting like someone different, depending on whether I'm being a husband, a teacher, a colleague, a Buddhist, a driver, a consumer of food, a brusher of teeth, etc. I am each of these. And in doing so, I am not any one self. Moreover, within my multiplicity of possible identities are many more depending on the specific feeling or mood of any moment. The result is that the more awareness Eka has, the less certain he is about singling out any one self as being him. Kind of parallel to this is that the Bodhisattva vow says delusions are inexhaustible. Thoughts are delusions. So the Bodhisattva vow says, in saying that, I vow to extinguish them. We are vowing to extinguish thoughts or control of thoughts. Nothing. Such thoughts just keep coming. And once we recognize that they are not really ours, we don't listen to them like we once did. Hearing, because I know myself well, it's difficult to say who I am. Bodhidharma immediately confirmed this, saying, you are right. You are my disciple. Verifying with this that due to their common understanding of not having a self, Eka was a Dharma heir. This acceptance of an equal of Eka as an equal does not depend on the fact that he had a Satori or Kensho experience. Pardon me, something's a little screwed here. Talk. I'm sorry. They gave him a Satori or a Kensho experience that gave conscious proof to his having had the same nature as everything. Do that again. This acceptance didn't depend on Eka having had a Satori or Kensho experience that's the same thing with different characters, that gave conscious proof of Eka having the same nature as everything. Such a realization would likely just be halfway to the truth, for a sense of self tended to remain, if not one of people who are realized, if not one of pride. When nothing, and that pride, of course, distinguishes one from others. You have enlightenment, others do not. That's not equality. When nothing distinguishes one from others, like this, what Dogen called dropping off body and mind of self and others. So dropping off body and mind of self and dropping off body and mind of others. In doing that, then no trace of enlightenment remains. That trace of enlightenment separated you from others. And that no trace, as I mentioned previously, ultimately has to be given up. It has to do with you being enlightened. There's a self there. And this no trace, therefore, note that no trace of enlightenment remains. And the end of this section of the Genjo Koan is this no trace continuing forever is the actualization of complete, perfect enlightenment in ordinary life. Eka had realized this, had revealed this to Bodhidharma in saying that he no longer could say who he was. Soto Zen teachers call this not knowing. Okay, thank you. Let me bring Jane in here. Here we are. Okay. Here we go. All right.
There.
Now, this would be the first time that we can have questions from either externally or internally. Or comments. Or advice. Or advice is good too. Anybody? Aha. There you are, Mark. What do you got to say?
Where's Mark?
Oh.
Where?
No, he's not here. Not Mark. I get mixed up. Wrong name.
John has his hand.
Okay, John. Daniel.
Daniel.
John. Daniel.
What if he had said there is no gap in this practice?
It still wouldn't work. That's why at the end I stuck in there something about. It's a good question though. Very good question. I stuck in there. Would suggest, but that fact that there would suggest means often I know in the Japanese, which is copies Chinese and a lot of their grammar, they wouldn't use my in that case. They wouldn't use a pronoun for self. So that may not have been there. Okay. And I haven't looked at the Chinese. I can't look at the Chinese. I can look at the Japanese, but not the Chinese. So let me see here. He was, but yeah, yeah, it would end up being the same meaning. There was no gap. There was no gap in practice.
You almost ought to come up and sit here and here so you can see what's going on.
Okay, because if there is a gap in practice, that is filled by thoughts that aren't connected to just doing what you're doing. And so I've repeated this about 3 or 4 times, pardon me for saying it again, but the sixth patriarch said, if you have those three, the first three that I mentioned, wanting, not wanting, and not caring, those three must be gone by before you can have realization. But after realization, there's still a possibility of laziness, and doubt, and pride. Those have to be gone by also. But anyway, the answer was the truth be told, I got lost in the English, maybe, and got stuck in the Mai. We don't need the Mai actually in the translation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. You caught me there, Daniel. I was going to slip right by there, but I quickly stuck in that rejoinder to myself in case I got caught by some tricky fellow like you there.
Peter,
Yeah. Yes, Ed.
you said earlier that all thoughts are delusion. Can you explain it? Or is it within a certain context?
No, it's within. First, I know that's. In fact, all thoughts are delusions.
Now, if I wanted to send you a birthday card, is that delusion?
Only if you didn't include a present.
I'll remember that.
But I haven't answered the question yet. When you are, this kind of goes in a different direction first, but actually, all thought is separate from reality. Thought in its own nature is separate from reality. I mean, hardly. I mean, cats don't apparently, other than purring. I mean, all feline animals don't make any noises, but cats. But the domestic cat learns how to make noises from us. Okay, so all living, most. I mean, what? I can't give a percentage, but I suppose it would be like only 1 in a million. You know, sentient beings, living beings, need what we call thought. They don't, the animals, they don't use words the way we use words. Thoughts are based upon words. So everything that is a thought is an image. It's a picture of a thing, just in its nature. And from that point of view, which is rather strict here, that's a delusion. It's not real. A thought. When I look at Ed and I say Ed, and when I say Ed to myself, that part of it is not real. From the point of view of the connection between the relative world and the absolute world. But it's a good question. Yes, Mark.
Who?
Mike. I know I get them mixed up. Mike.
Thoughts are still part of, for lack of a better word, Bodhidharma stuff, because everything is part of it. It's just we can't. The minute we say I, mine, we, or anything like that, we have separated ourselves from our momentary experience of being here now. But thoughts are there. We just have to realize their purpose as a tool and not the, I'm really running out of words here, but they're concepts, and concepts are hollow, but they still have a purpose, and we have to learn how to use that purpose, but not get hung up in them. Does that make any sense?
Like always, Mike, it makes perfect sense. I'll take notes. I had to find some time you don't make sense. So I'll let you know, but yes, discuss a new person. Scott was here, oh my goodness, 7 or 8 years ago, Scott.
Well, last time I was there was for your mountain sea ceremony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I was here with Joel, and then before for his session
Yeah,
in more recent years.
Yes, Scott left us to go get a PhD. We were not directly connected. He would have, but anyway, but that's what happened anyway. Literally, time. He got his PhD, and now he's teaching now.
So yeah, at first it sounded like there's a preference for non-thought in Zen. The way.
No, it's not a preference for non-thought. It's a preference for realizing the relative nature of thought.
Okay. Otherwise, the way I understand it, then there would be no means of realization without thought.
That's a good question. I think probably there would be, but I don't know. Jane, want to answer that one, Jane?
Well, I don't think thought has anything to do with realization. I think it's when we step outside of it, even briefly, that we have moments of understanding something. But before that, I mean, thoughts are something, no matter, they may be something that stirred up our emotions in such a way that we're more receptive to experience, but I think finally, when realization of any kind happens, I don't think thought is interfering in it. I don't believe thought has anything to do with realization.
Okay.
Yeah, thought.
I don't anybody want to
And
argue with that.
no. A thought is
A thought is a delusion in that it's
yeah.
not based on a reality.
It's the devil.
Well, I don't know if I go that far, but I do think that it's an interference more than it's a help, unless we're specifically using it as a tool for something like planning or working out a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the kind of like the point of Mistopheles, probably.
If anybody disagrees with
illusion,
that, please bring it up.
any meaning to anybody.
How about the musical Cats?
I never saw that.
I never did
There's a
either.
character, Mr. Mistopheles.
It was probably connected to that. Well, it definitely means a devilish thing. But whether it's connected to thought, I don't know how they wrote the character. But yeah.
But it's something to work with, not try to get rid of, right?
Yeah,
No, of
not
course.
try to
Yeah,
get
of
rid
course,
of, but
no.
not be dominated by it.
You bad boy, don't think. No. It doesn't work that way. No.
It's just not to be overwhelmed by thoughts to the point where you believe that's the real experience.
Yes, John?
Is this really a bit of a difference in philosophy? In my head, I often think that like the Rinzai school, for instance, it's the emphasis on the obtaining of enlightenment or the attaining of Kensho, whereas in Soto, the emphasis seems to be that we all already exists within us. We already have Buddha nature, and it's the delusion of thought, greed, hate, and delusion, those things that put a veil over our innate, so stripping away those things seems to just kind of, the piece of coal into a diamond, or the muddy water to the lotus. I mean, it's already there. It's just uncovering it, rather than, it seems Rinzai is looking to obtain. Is that
Well,
a philosophical difference, or?
when because the Bodhidharma, of course, koans are totally Chinese in origin, at least ethically, you might say, ethnically, and so, in fact, Rinzai stresses the first half, getting to the first half, getting to realization. But Rinzai doesn't stop there. That's very important part. I don't know Rinzai, but I know this much, is that you pass the Genjo koans, a Genjo koan, but a series of them in some way, and then after that you continue to study koans for a long time. And even if you do 400 of them, and even that you may not get Inkashome. Okay, it depends. And so therefore, for Rinzai and Soto, the goal is exactly the same. Is that Rinzai stresses getting to the first step, and then going beyond the first step. And Soto Zen says, just sit, you'll get to the end. You might say, and you may or may not have realization. That's why Tsukuroshi said what I quoted earlier. It's good to have realization, but not totally necessary, perhaps. He added the word perhaps too.
Can that word realization exist on its own, or is it realization of something? And if it's a realization of something, what's that?
Could you hear that? Everybody?
That's a good question.
Good. No. We have this new mic. You see the new mic, and then it worked.
Did you all hear the question?
Yeah, they said they did. Yeah. Okay. Now, that's a good question, because we don't need the word. So you don't need the word realization. That's just a label for it. It's a label for experiencing enlightenment. So I guess you'd say realization of enlightenment. So we just left out that world. But enlightenment means the absolute, and the absolute means the totality. There's no connection to a deity or something like that. Just the whole thing, and you realize the whole thing. But in what we talked about, we were studying this last night in the Genjo koan. I mean, in the Tenzo koan. Something like this last night.
I think realization, it has two meanings. It is to kind of understand or comprehend something, but then there's another meaning that is used kind of more in foreign languages and sometimes in English, but to realize something, to make real, to make, when something becomes real. I feel like the second definition is a little closer to when something becomes real to us.
Yeah.
Is a little bit closer to what it is versus to realize that, I have termites in my wall or something like that. I realize that. That's not, I think, what is, or in a way it kind of is. But when I think of realization, I think of that term for it,
That's a very good point. Yeah. To realize something to make real something that is unknown. Joanne?
I agree with Alan. Koans are just meant to kind of like, they're sort of like a microcosm of the realization of enlightenment. So like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Does a dog have Buddha nature? It's like that's the world we live in as a human being, but like there are questions that that you can't solve intellectually or with thought. like Jane said, you have to be outside of thought. And it brings a minute realization of enlightenment in our lives. Like I think before I might have described a metaphor that was given to me was like if you had a black priest's robe and enlightenment was the light behind it, and every koan was like a pinprick of light, you know, that goes through the cloth. Well, if you have a lot of pinpricks, you're getting a little more understanding of the realization of enlightenment. Because like, you know, what you were saying, Peter, from Suzuki Roshi, like, well, if you have an enlightenment experience, well, then what? You know, and after that is like, yeah, then again, it's like the dropping of all that stuff. And then I think if you are the dog with Buddha nature, you're not thinking about what you're doing, right? You're just dog. You're doing dog. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yes.
anyway, when you I'm going to make a
Yes,
joke
it
on
does.
it, but which not a joke, but one that's is that, you know, that's a part of it's the opposite. You know, you realize that the dog has Buddha nature. So the second part of the koan is, does a dog have Buddha nature? Yes. The first part of the koan, does a dog have Buddha nature? No. Okay, you solve that and it's realization. But then you realize the dog has Buddha nature. Really. Because you and the dog are the same, you know, there's no difference. So or you realize that no one, it's just kind of funny that way. But that occurred to me just then. But in actual nature, the dog has Buddha nature. Of course he does.
And still continues to be a dog.
And it still continues to be a dog.
That's what Joanne said.
Joanne is saying, yeah. That's what you. Okay.
And a human being still continues to be a human being.
Yeah.
The human being does human being.
Mhm.
Joanne does Joanne, Peter does Peter, Jane does Jane. And it's all Buddha nature. It's just, are you thinking about like, if Joanne is thinking, oh, do I look good doing this? Like, do I look good wearing my rakusu, sitting in my apartment? Then Joanne is thinking, and Joanne's not Joanne, or whatever. Joanne, you know, Joanne is not Joanne anyway. But
that's a good point, Joanne. When you're thinking,
yeah, you can't get away from it.
Anybody? Thank you, John.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but what seems interesting is that through enlightenment or awakening or realization, whatever you want to call it, the end result really of dropping away body and mind and thought in order to achieve that is really to change your thought. I mean, it's kind of like what Jane uses, that analogy of you're going up in the plane and you've never been up in the plane before. But now you see the world as this totally different place. But you're not up in the plane all the time. You're going to be back down on the ground in the world of thought, in the real world. So really, the end result, it would seem, that we're looking for is to change the way that we think through our realization, to change the way that we perceive the world and the Dharma.
I would change one word. I would say, you said, go back to the real world, and actually it's go back to the unreal world.
So yes, so going back to the world of form, you still have to go back to the world of form.
Yeah.
And so what you're bringing back to the world of form, hopefully, is an adjustment in the way that you think, the way that you perceive your world of form. Now that you have seen the world of form as it is, you know, now that you've seen as it really is, now that you've seen, emptiness, form, all of it without boundaries, but now you're back in form, you're thinking differently, you're perceiving differently. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 that, that's really what the goal is, to change your thinking. Is that yes, or you think no?
Yes.
Yes. Jane says yes, I say yes too. Yes, Mike. And then over here in the
Chris.
I got a different question. When we talk about realization, the minute we strive for realization, we're already off the path. Realization will happen through our efforts, but we don't want to do it for that goal because you're already separating yourself from that experience. So in a lot of ways, we just live our lives. We do study, we do meditate, we do, good things or whatever. But the minute we strive for realization, we've already left the path. We're going after a concept, and the realization is not a concept. It's just an experience, and it'll happen when it happens. Is that kind of along that, or am I off the path as well?
That sounds fine too, Mike. Yeah. Yes.
That's totally different though than the idea behind, let's say Rinzai, because there is a strong striving
Yes, there
in
is.
those traditions for Kensho. I mean, they're not like, oh, we're just they are looking for Kensho every moment of every sitting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So it's very different. Yes, it is. Yeah. So anyway, but of course, we're all striving. Otherwise, we would be completely foolish to. I don't know the order of. I think Joanne, did you notice any hands up before you? Well, let me call on people.
Rachel.
Rachel
had her hand up for quite a while.
Okay, Rachel.
That's okay. Art and music, even writing, is that also like thoughts? Can be delusions or tools, because the verb, to realize in art and music and writing too, you are making physical even a concept sometimes, but usually it's maybe not even a concept. You find as you make music or create art or write something, you can have a realization you didn't sit down to paint or to make. But I just wondered, with imagination, a delusion or realization?
Jane?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, she couldn't hear you, I guess. To be nice about it.
Truthfully, actually, I was looking on my iPhone to find a drawing. It's an engraving called Flammarion. And it's the one I was trying to describe last night in our meeting. It's a man, it's medieval, and it's a drawing where he's looking from his reality, which is all the sun, the stars, the moon, trees, and everything, and he's stuck his head through the edge of his reality, and he sees another whole reality on the other side of it that's just a bit bigger. And that's, I think, what we're talking about, is perceiving a reality that's bigger. It's called Flammarion. It's you can find it in color elsewhere.
Oh,
And the
I
whole
have
thing,
seen.
yeah, it's really a kind of surprising picture. And so I was looking that up while you were talking, and I was listening to you, but I was trying to find this to say what I think about reality. When you stick your head through your reality and you perceive another reality beyond your reality is what I would think is what we consider realization. Or
And it could go beyond that.
and it could go beyond that, yeah. So it's, I mean, that's just one of many realities, and every time we wake up to another reality, you might even call that realization, making that reality, new reality, real in your life. What were you saying then?
Well, I was just thinking of creativity, if you like, imagination with art, music, and writing too, that you can find yourself realizing something, writing or composing, which it wasn't a concept you had. I mean, in other words, you're not writing down or creating something you exactly thought you thought. You end up realizing something that you had not planned on.
Yeah.
And that to me is a unknown mystery kind of that really does go into a realization that isn't just a planned project.
I agree with you on that. That for me, art has that quality of always being open-ended, and never can be totally planned on. And so every time you enter into making something, some new part of yourself opens up to it. And I don't know if you'd call that realization or not, or just expanding your understanding of art more. I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely, it's an open-ended quality. And that open-ended makes it uncertain.
Okay, Joe?
Oh, we forgot
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah, Chris had his hand up first, I guess. We'll say that, Joe.
You want to turn that and let him see it?
I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting thing, but you're not close enough.
Nah, I'm good.
Okay, yeah.
Well, so a couple Dogen quotes came to mind during the talk and discussion. Joanne's comment made me think of well, actually the whole thing made me think of what you think before enlightenment is no help. But then that and the whole idea of can we get away from thinking, or is thinking somehow a hindrance, reminded me of realization is like the moon reflected in the water, or a puddle. The puddle does not hinder the moon, and the moon does not break the puddle. Neither of those things happens. And actually, besides our own sort of subjective sentience, what else could a human being use or experience, or how else could a human being experience any kind of realization? And then to that end, there's the concept of using the ground to get up, or the sort of like the ground is, the world of form and discrimination, and then the sky is enlightenment or realization. That in order to get to the sky, you have to push off from the ground, or you have to use the boat to get to the other shore. But then once you get to the other shore, there is no shore, no other shore, no boat, no water, whatever. And then it also sort of made me think of this idea that I think so then thoughts are helpful in that sense. But then also, since words convey thoughts, and thoughts are sort of dependent on words, and a student needs a teacher to attain realization, and in order to actually teach the student, the teacher needs to use thoughts and words, that those words are actually very necessary. But I know that's kind of like a logical syllogism, and logical validity is no guarantee of truth.
Yeah. Well, I like when you said that about the moon and the puddle. In that image, the moon is the absolute, and the puddle is us. And this goes with Jane's picture. She just showed us.
Yeah.
It's the same thing actually. Yeah, it's showing the same thing because they don't hinder each other. The two words don't hinder each other. The two worlds, as it were, don't hinder each other. Now, Joe.
Yeah, so I was wondering, what the difference between I and no I is. Is it that I is just too much blame on, what is experienced, whereas no I is just part of just human nature?
Anybody? Yes, Chris?
So just that it's not that the sense of awareness or self is false. It's just that we say I. Most people, most of the time, and that's like a 99 followed by a bajillion nines % of the time, identify with the awareness, with the subjective perspective, and call it I. we're not actually referring to the I as it really is. We're referring to a very, very limited imagination or fog of delusion that we have latched onto with a small amount of infinite awareness as sort of it's been refracted by an individual's mind. So that's the problem, is they're referring to something real by a very, 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 very messed up sort of distortion. They're distorting it with concepts.
And Joanne, I hadn't forgot you. You were in my mind.
So I had a different perspective, and I the metaphor of like the plane and the air being the absolute, and then then maybe being on the ground. So for me, my perspective is like, okay, well, if I'm in a plane, breathe the canned air. Feel the kid behind you kicking on your chair. Feel how stiff your body is because it's a tight chair. Now, if I go to, and then when I get back on the ground, right, breathe the fresh air, see the blue sky when I land in LAX and the palm trees, and experience, hailing a cab or calling your Uber, right? But like, if I am in the plane, I look at the clouds and I feel the bump behind me by the kid, kicking my chair, and then I'm like, if I go to, that kid has very poor manners. They must not have very good parents if the parent is allowing the kid to kick my chair, and fuck you, dude. Then that's like a separation, right? Instead of like,
to say the least.
yeah. Well, because I actually had that experience. But,
recently.
as soon as I start thinking about like the clouds, oh my God, I'm really high up, I'm really scared, or like, Jesus, to make these chairs any smaller, then I'm not really, am I
think we have to
removed from the experience of being plain?
What's the matter, Harvey?
I think, I'm sorry, listen, one more person here.
Yeah.
Because I'm beginning to get thoughted out. But Sandy hasn't spoken yet. So Sandy?
Oh,
You want to? Right.
let's see. Well, the only thing I have to say on this matter is you can have an experience, you can have a realization, something can happen and open your mind to another view of life. But the one thing you can't do is hold on to it. And if that realization was a wonderful thing, and the desire to hold on to it will strip it away. And that's one of the reasons I think we have to sit forever, is that nothing is permanent. So being able to live in that state is not possible, because things change, and we're dealing with the real world. And the enlightenment portion is all something you experience within yourself, or whatever there is to experience within. But you just can't hold on to it. And the idea of striving for it as some kind of permanent, wonderful place doesn't work.
No, very true. Very true. Spencer, you're the last person on my screen who I haven't heard from. You want to say something, or you want to pass?
We're looking at his iPhone.
can't hear him.
I know we can't hear him because all we see is dog. His enlightened dog.
Oh, no. That's
That's not a
blanket.
dog.
A blanket.
That's a dog. I'll pass.
Okay, good. Okay. So let's go. Anyway, so let me tell you, of course, next week is the grand opening.